Okay, we're up to Nundalat and Bez, a few lines on the bottom. Just to review, the Mishnah said that if there's a hole in the trachea, the psul is if the hole is the size of a coin. So the Gemara had said yesterday from Rabbi Nachman that up to the coin is kosher, but the coin itself, the size of the coin itself is a problem. Ad v'loy ad b'chlal. Okay, ad v'loy ad b'chlal. So the Gemara is going to start asking questions about other times in Shas where we say ad v'ad b'chlal. Seemingly. And we see the Gemara, some of these questions are incredibly obvious, but the Gemara is leading to like a crescendo. So the Gemara says, Tashema, Hadakin shebekli cheres. If you have a small earthenware vessel, so it's mekabel tuma, and then it breaks, and let's say half of it is broken, but it still has somewhat of the original usage, the halacha is it's still a kli regarding tuma. Now what's the measurements? Meaning, how much oil, it originally held oil, it broke, but it still holds oil. How much oil must it hold in order for it to still be mekabel tuma? So the Brisa says, like the Mishnah says, hein v'karkeseyen v'doifnesehen, whether the original vessel themselves, or the bottom of the vessels, the sides of the vessel, meaning it broke, b'kitzer, but it still has the same functionality. Shaloi musmachim, the halacha is as follows. Shiyuran b'chdei sichas katan. It has to hold enough oil that you could put oil on a baby's finger. Okay, so let's say it's half an ounce. Okay, now how big was the kli originally? If you have a giant gallon of a vessel, you have a giant gallon vessel, and now it can hold the baby's oil that's nothing. So what was the shear originally that was a kli? What was the size of the original kli that this is still considered a kli? Ad lug. The halacha is ad lug. If the original kli was up to a lug, and now it's broken, but it still has the functionality that it could put oil on a baby's finger, then it's mekabel tuma. Now the question is up to a lug, but what about a lug itself? Is it ad v'ad b'chlal or ad v'lo ad b'chlal? My lav lug kilamata, does it not include a lug? And you see that it's ad a lug v'ad b'chlal. So the Gemara says loy lug kilamayla. No, ad v'lo ad b'chlal. It's seemingly such an incredibly obvious question answer. The Gemara is leading to something. So up to a lug, does it not include a lug? No, up to and not including a lug. Let's keep going. Now the Mishnah continues. Again, if it was originally a lug, or a little bit less up to a lug, and it broke, it has to be able to hold enough oil to anoint a baby's finger. Let's say it's bigger than a lug. So the halach is milug ad revius, a lug until saw b'revius, until up to a saw. So from lug up to a saw, then it has to hold a revius. Meaning, if it was originally a lug up to a saw and it broke, it has to be able to hold a revius of oil. So lug up to a saw. My lav saw kilmata, does it not go and include a saw? So you see it's ad v'ad b'chlal. So the Gemara says loy saw kilmayla. No, loy ad v'loy ad b'chlal. Keep going. Then the Mishnah says from a saw to sasayim, from one saw to two saw, it has to be able to still hold the chatzi lug. So is this not also including sasayim? My lav sasayim kilmayla, loy sasayim kilmayla. Okay, so it's the same question over and over and over again, where you have measurements, and it says, is it not including that measurement? Ad v'ad b'chlal, loy, ad v'loy ad b'chlal. The problem is, this is so obvious, like what's the Gemara doing? Here's the point. All of your presumptions, there's a brisa that clearly says ad v'ad b'chlal. So we kept on saying ad a lug does not include a lug. No, ad and not including a lug. Ad a sasayim does not include a sasayim. No, it doesn't include. Yes, it does. There's a clear brisa, v'hatanya. The brisa clearly states, lug kilmata, saw kilmata, sasayim kilmata. All of these measurements include a lug, include a saw, include sasayim. So it's ad v'ad b'chlal. So it's clear as day ad v'ad b'chlal. So how did Rabbi Nachman say yesterday, ad v'lo ad b'chlal, when it's clear ad v'ad b'chlal? You know the answer to all this is? Really, Rabbi Nachman holds ad v'ad b'chlal. So why yesterday did he say ad v'lo ad b'chlal? Because he's being machmer. He's always machmer. That's the rule. When it comes to ad v'ad, ad v'lo ad, he's just machmer. And therefore yesterday, what was the point? If there's a hole in the trachea, the size of a coin, it's kosher. Up to a coin. Does it include the size of a coin? No. Ad v'lo ad b'chlal. Why? Because that's a chumrah. Because if it includes a coin, that means the coin itself, the size of a coin itself, is still kosher. He's saying, no, it's not kosher. I'm going to be machmer. In this discussion, we're talking about, is the kli still mekabel tuma? So it's holding a little bit of oil. So up to revius, it's still mekabel tuma. If it's larger than revius, then it's meaning up to and including a revius. Why? Because that's a chumrah the opposite. If I have a small jar that held a revius, right? If it held up to revius, then it's still mekabel tumah if it has a little bit of oil. It's able to hold a little bit of oil. Up to revius. What about a revius itself? Yeah, a revius itself. I thought we said ad v'lo ad b'chlal. Yeah, but over here we're going to be machmer. If you say ad v'lo ad b'chlal in this case, that would be a leniency, because you'd be saying, oh, it's a revius. It doesn't hold that has to hold more oil. It doesn't hold enough oil. It's tahar. In other words, it's very simple. He looks at each situation and he says, which way is the one to be machmer? I'm going to go that way. So sometimes it's going to be ad v'ad b'chlal, sometimes it's going to be ad v'lo ad b'chlal. It's very simple. It's his consistency is that he's strict. Says the Gemara, Hasam lo chumra, Dam Rav Avo and Rav Yechanan, Kol shiurei chachamim lahachmer. Chazal are always machmer in the shiurim. Chutz when it comes to ad v'ad b'chlal or ad v'lo ad b'chlal, we're always machmer, except for a gris shel ksamim lahakol. The size of a bean. The halacha is that a woman has to stain the size of a bean for her to be a nida. That has to be the size of a bean, actually ad v'lo ad b'chlal. You have to be a little bit more than a bean. Okay, that's for reasons not for this discussion. So in other words, we're consistent in the ad v'ad b'chlal or ad v'lo ad b'chlal. Our consistency is that we're always strict. And the Gemara says, I'll prove it to you, and the rest of the daf is much, much easier. Dekanami, I'll prove it to you. Diktani, remember yesterday, I'm not going to get into all the details, but if you remember yesterday, we had a whole discussion about the size of the ropes. That if you have a bed, right? A bed is mekabel tumah, but rope is not. So if the rope is considered ancillary to the bed, it's mekabel tumah. If the rope is considered on its own zach, it's hanging off, it doesn't have usage of a bed, then it's considered a rope and it's not mekabel tumah. So we had yesterday up to 5 to 10. So you know what this brisa clearly states? The brisa says, Allah katani, chamisha kol mayla, asar kol mata. 5, up to 5, it's ad v'lo ad b'chlal. Up to 10, it's ad v'ad b'chlal. Meaning within the Mishnah of the rope itself, sometimes it's ad v'chlal, sometimes ad v'lo ad b'chlal. What's the explanation? The answer is, we're always being machmer. That's it. Our consistency is that we are always strict. Okay. Here, until the rest of the daf, is just treifus. It's quick and easy and moving, and it's not very challenging. Okay. Nitlat chol, the Mishnah said, if the spleen is entirely removed from the animal is kosher. Rav Avira Mishmei de Rava lo yishanu l'nitel. Says Rav Avira, it's only kosher if the spleen is removed. Aval nikiv, but if the spleen is punctured, treifa. Punctured spleen is treifa. Okay, that's Rav Avira. Says the Gemara, I have a question. Masir Rav Yosi bar Ovin, Vitim Rav Yosi bar Zvida. I have the following Mishnah. It's very clever. The question is very clever because I don't think most people would have thought of it. The Mishnah says 2 halachas. The first halacha is not relevant. The second halacha is what we're going to focus on. The first halacha is that if you shecht an animal and inside the animal there's a baby, the baby is kosher via the shechita of the mom. So therefore, if you actually go into the baby's womb and just cut the baby into little pieces, you could eat it. Because, when I say baby, I mean the little cow. You could eat it. Why? You didn't shech the baby. You don't have to shech the baby. The shechita of the mother covers the shechita of the baby. That's the first halacha. That's not relevant to our discussion. The Gemara says, here's the other question though. What if I have a cow? No baby, just a cow. I go into the cow, I have surgery, and I cut the spleen in half. And then I shech the mother. Can I eat the spleen? So the halacha is no. Because I cut the spleen in half, it was considered Eiver min achai, then when I shecht it, it doesn't help. Okay. Point is, if you cut the spleen in half, Bekitza, if you cut the spleen in half of an animal, take it out, you can't eat it because it's Eiver min achai. That's the brisa. Huh? Yeah. Correct. Now, yeah, the chiddush is that even if it remains in the animal during the shechita doesn't cover it because you cut it when it was alive. Meaning you cut a piece of that spleen when it was alive. You maybe didn't put it on your plate. You left it inside the animal, but it's akin to putting it on your plate. So suppose this is Eiver min achai. What does that have to do with that discussion? Wait a minute. I thought a punctured spleen makes it a treifa. So why are you telling me that it's Eiver min achai? You cut the spleen in half. I thought, don't say Eiver min achai, say the entire animal is treifa. The focus of that Mishnah is Eiver min achai, but it's saying, if I cut the spleen in half, I can't eat the half a spleen because Eiver min achai. What do you mean, Eiver min achai? The animal's a treifa. Tell me just the animal's a treifa. Forget about Eiver min achai. You told me a punctured spleen makes the animal treifa, so why? So that's the Gemara's question. Now, there's an obvious answer, which is the Mishnah is not focusing on treifas. It's focusing on Eiver min achai. You're right. treifa also. But the Gemara, let's see, the Gemara says like this: Minat chulim min akloyos. If you cut while the animal's alive part of the spleen or part of the kidneys, asa b'achila, you're not allowed to eat them. Even if you left them in the animal, the shechita doesn't help because they even achai. Says the Gemara. The implication is that the issue is that Eva Menachai, but what about the fact the entire animal is a treifa? Because you just got finished telling me that a punctured spleen makes the animal treifa. So the Gemara says, the truth is, so why didn't the Mishnah mention the animal's a treifa? So the Gemara says, the truth is, it is a treifa. So why did the Mishnah say Eva Menachai and not treifa? The answer is because the Mishnah is focusing on Eva Menachai. The Gemara says, I did Tani Rishim with the Bachil, Tanami Seva, also Bachila. The truth is, it's Eva Menachai. And the animal really is a treifa. So why does it say that you can't eat the spleen, so you can't eat the animal? Because for the flow of the Mishnah, we were focusing on the inside. So the first case was the fetus, now it's the spleen. You're right, it's taka treifa. Or this next line, I don't mitzias, I don't say. Or it could be there's a difference between a cut spleen and a punctured spleen. Don't really understand that too much, but punctured spleen would make it a treifa. A cut spleen wouldn't. Don't really, Mitzias, I don't understand that too much, but okay, maybe, okay. A ruptured spleen is more dangerous to the animal than if you cut this spleen. All right, fine. Now, the Mishnah had said that if the kidneys are removed, the animal is still kosher. If the animal has a diseased kidney, then it's a problem. So removed kidney is fine. Diseased kidney will cause the animal to die. But this is only true if the diseased part reaches, go to the next page, l'makom charitz. Yeah, they have, article has a picture. Kidneys in the inside sort of have this like fat highway in the middle. The disease has to hit that part of the kidneys for it to be a treifa. If the disease is only on the external part of the treifa, if the disease is only on the external part of the kidneys, the animal can survive. The heicha makom charitz, and where in the kidneys is it a problem? If the disease reaches, l'chiyura detuta masni, it's the white part under the loins. Have you seen the kidneys? In the middle part of the kidneys, it has a white fatty line across. That's the part of the animal. By the way, in the back of yours, they have pictures. The back of your Gemaras. It's interesting. So the point is, if I don't know about this daf. No, my there's pictures in the back. The point is, if the white part in the middle, that's the part where the animal has disease. It's treif. Amrav Nechunya sheltinu l'kuli trufay d'marava. I asked all the treifa experts of Eretz Yisrael, Amrali, hilchasa karachish bar papa. We paskin like rachish bar papa that a diseased kidney is a treifa. But less hilchasa karavavira. But we do not paskin like Rav Avira, who said a ruptured spleen is a treifa. We don't paskin that way. A ruptured spleen will not make it a treifa. But says the Gemara. So we're passing a ruptured spleen will not cause it to be a treifa. But apparently a ruptured spleens have the thick part on top and they sort of taper down a little bit like a carrot. So it says the Gemara, Loi Amrun Ela Bekulshe, Sumche treifa. But that's only true that a ruptured spleen does not make a treifa if it got ruptured on the bottom part, which is thin. But if it got ruptured on the top part, which is thicker, that's a treifa for sure. The Ishtayer Bekoive Dinar Zav Kshera. And even if the puncture was in the thicker end, if there is a dinar thickness of spleen intact that was not ruptured, it's kosher. Okay. The Gemara says the following rule. Amri b'marava. They say in Eretz Yisrael, kalapoisel b'reya kosher b'kulya. Anything that would make a treifa by the lungs is kosher by the kidneys. Meaning, if you were to make a list of things that make a treifa by the lungs, you would then draw a line. By kidneys, it's kosher. So like a punctured lung, treif. Punctured kidney, fine. Sirchas on the lungs, a problem. Sirchas on the kidneys, fine. So lung good, bad, kidneys good. Says the Gemara, Sharei nekev pasal b'riya, because if it's a punctured lung, it's treif. V'kasher b'kulya, but a punctured kidney is fine. So the Gemara deduces, the Gemara says, well, if bad lungs equals good kidneys, so the opposite should also be true. Whatever is treif by the kidneys should treif up, should be kosher by the lungs, right? If X and then Y, so then whatever, you understand. X and then plus, then X and plus. Just it should go the reverse. It's a two-way street. So we should make it a two-way street. In other words, whatever is treif by one is kosher by the other, and vice versa. Says the Gemara, that is not true. And here's the danger. We've had this once before. When it comes to treifus, just making deduction or inferences is a dangerous thing, because when you're dealing with medical things, it might make sense to you, but that's just not how the body works, right? Like, making an inference like, oh, if lungs and kidneys are not the same, then that would mean that whatever is bad by the kidneys would be kosher by the lungs. That's not necessarily true. The body responds differently. The Gemara says, Maskor Tanchuma Viklolahu, is this a valid rule that lungs and kidneys are always the opposite? Bahari Mugla, when it comes to pus, to kasha bereya, if the lung has a pus pocket on it, that's fine. And pasal bakulya. But by akulya, we just got finished saying that if there's pus because there's decay in the kidneys, it's a problem. So you see the kidneys, so that's mugla de kasha bereya, pasal bakulya. So then, obviously, right, we said that we wanted to say that whatever trafes up a kidney will definitely trafe up a lung. That's not necessarily true. The Gemara says, "Hari ma'im zakin deksherim hacha v'hacha." And by the way, even more confusing. If it's filled with pus, then it's a problem by the kidneys. But if it's filled with a white liquid, then it's kosher by both. The answer is, I don't know how these rules work. So you're making rules, but it doesn't seem to follow the Metzias. It says the Gemara, Elam Ravashi, Trefus kamadam adadi. You are not able to compare trefus to each other. Ein oim b'trefus zu daim lezu. We don't say, well, if A to B, then vice versa as well. It doesn't work like that. Why? Right? If you cut a part under the knee, the animal will survive. Above the knee, the animal will die. It's 2 inches. What's the answer? Kadosh Baruch Hu made animals and made bodies in a certain way. You can't make rules. It just have to each situation. Now, the Gemara said before that if there's a clear liquid in the kidneys or the lungs, it's kosher. It's only true if they're a clear liquid, avalakiri. But if the liquid is cloudy, then it's treifa, then it's a treifa. And even if it's clear, it's only if it doesn't smell bad. But if it's clear liquid that smells bad, that's coming out of the kidneys or the lungs, that is going to be a treifa. Okay, let's keep going. If a kidney shrivels due to a disease, how small does it have to get for it to be a treifa? So it says the Gemara, Bedaka, if a small animal, ad kipul. If it's the size of a bean or smaller, if it's slightly smaller than a bean, that's a problem. Begasa, and a large animal, ad kanava beinis. If it's smaller than a medium grape, then it's a problem. Okay? The Gemara continues. The Mishnah had said that if the lower jaw of an animal is removed, it's still kosher. Says the Gemara, because it can still survive. But Amar Rav Zera speaks out something which is, I think, very obvious, and that is Rav Zera says, Lo yishan shechayil lichas edei le'ito mamra. If it's missing the lower jaw, how is it going to survive? Won't it starve? So says the Gemara, if a person can still feed it, it can't eat itself. It can't feed itself. But a person can put the food in its throat. If the person can still feed it and it'll take down food, then it's kosher. But if, let's say, it's missing the jaw in such a way that the farmer can't feed it, I don't know what that means, but see, the farmer can't get food in, so then it's a treifa, because it can't survive, it's going to starve. The Gemara continues, Nitla Eim Shalom, the Mishnah said if the uterus is removed, it's kosher. The Gemara just tells us a rule. There are 3 terminology for animal uteruses in Shas. Tana, Hi Ha'eim, Eim is 1, Tarfachas is the 2nd, and Shalfuchas. Those are all different terminologies for the womb, the uterus of an animal throughout Shas. Okay, this next line of the Gemara, this just has to be Metzias, has changed. The Gemara had said that if the lung becomes shriveled because the animal's afraid, then it depends. If it got shriveled due to God, meaning lightning, then it's a treifa. But if I scared it, if Gavin stood behind the door and then the cow walked in and boo, and then it'll survive. Why it makes a difference, I have no idea as a Metzias, but apparently fear by people can be rectified, can be healed. Fear by God cannot. Okay. So it says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanon, and by the way, obviously the question is how do I know? I just open up an animal that has a shriveled lung due to fright. I'm supposed to figure out what scared it. So the Gemara says there's a way to figure it out. Tana Rabbanon, Ezech Harusa, what's an example of this shriveled lung? Kol shetzamka riyashala, any animal whose lung shriveled because of fear. Bidei shemayim, if the fear was caused by heaven, kshera. Bidei adam, treifa. But if it was done by man, it's treifa. So you have heaven and man. Those are the 2 choices. Says Rav Shimon ben Elazar, af bidei kol abriyos. Even if it's by animals. Now, here's the question. Man, treifa, kosher. God, treifa. Man, kosher. God, treifa, right? Oh, no, opposite. I'm sorry. My bad. Opposite. God, kosher. Man, treifa. Comes to Shimon Elazar, he says, animals also. Which one? There's 2 options. He just says animals also. Animals are like man or animals are like God? So it says, meaning a lion roars. So is that like lightning or is that like Gavin? So it says the Gemara, what is Rishon Elazar saying? There's words missing from his statement. He's saying animals also. Animals is like people or animals is like God? So the Gemara says it's a brayso that speaks it out clearly. If the animal was feared, got scared by people, then it's treif. Rishon Elazar says even by animals is also treif. So Rishon Elazar clearly states that animals is like people, that it's treif. Now here's the obvious question. You come across a lung that's shriveled. I'm supposed to know how it got shriveled. How am I supposed to know if it got shriveled by man or by God or by animals? So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Chana have a cause of midbara. Rabbi Chana was traveling in the desert. Eshkach hani divri dit samik readitu. He found a liver of a ram's whose lungs, a ram's whose lungs were shriveled. So he wanted to know how they were shriveled. Were they shriveled by God or were they shriveled by man? So Asa Shalbe Midrashi asked the base medrash, and this is what they said. Bekaita aisi meshichli chivara. In the summer, bring white earthenware basins. Umalin umay kririm filled with cold water. Banchinu meis leis and soak the lungs for 24 hours. Ihajin barayu. If they reabsorb and they come back to the original side, bidei shemayim, then that's a sign that it was bidei shemayim and it's kshera. Biloi, but if they never become back to their size, treifa, that means that. So that's the way to tell. Okay. So if you rehydrate them, see if they rehydrate. Bisavaisa, that's during the summer. In the winter, Aisi Meshichle Shichuma, bring dark basins. Umalin Umay Bshure, bring lukewarm water. Anchinu Meis, again, leave it 24 hours. Iadra Berei Kshari, but like Shera. If it rehydrates, it's kosher, and if not, not. Okay, just to the end of the daf, we're going to be dealing with gluda. Gluda means an animal loses its skin due to illness. So the question is, so it's a machlekes tanoim. Tanu Rabbana hagluda Rameir machshir v'chachamim paislim. It's a machlekes Rameir and the chacham. According to Rameir, it's kosher. The chacham say it's possible. Kfar Heid Elazar Safra v'Yoichem ben Gudgada al gluda shpsula. They testify that a gluda is possible, not like Rameir. And Amr Shimon Elazar chazer by Rameir. Shimon Elazar says you should know Rameir was chazer, meaning originally they argued, they no longer argue. Even Rameir agrees that an animal that sheds its skin due to illness is a treif. So here's the question. Shimon Elazar is saying that according to Rabbi, he was chayzer, which means it was a machlekes, but no longer machlekes. The problem is Shimon Elazar in a different brisa once said the following words: Lo yinechleku Rameir v'chachamim. Doesn't lo yinechleku means they never argued? So now he's saying they originally argued, but he was chayzer. But the problem is Shimon Elazar in a different brisa said Lo yinechleku Rameir v'chachamim. Says the Gemara, Michlal, the Shimon Elazar, Polig Rameir b'gluda. Vatani, but the Brisa says, Shimon Elazar, Loi nechleku Rameir v'chamal gluda shabsula. Everyone agrees, Loi nechleku, there is no machlaikas. So was there a machlaikas and then Rameir was chayzer, or was there never a machlaikas? Ukvar heid Rav Oishia b'nei Shav Yehuda hab sam lefnei Rav Akiva Shem Rav Tarfin al gluda shabsula. Okay, so by the way, this is what we'll deal with until the rest of the daf. Let's say the animal sheds all its skin, but it leaves one small patch of skin the size of a coin. It's kosher, because that skin will regenerate and regrow for the entire body. The point is, though, we have a steer in Rishon Elazar. Rishon Elazar says originally that it was a machlekes, but the Rameir was chayzer. But he also said loy nechleku. So is it loy nechleku or nechleku? So the Gemara says very obvious. Amr Rav Nachman Yitzchak, my loy nechleku, loy Omer Rameir b'chamchlekes. When he says loy nechleku, it doesn't mean they never argued. It means the argument no longer stands. I.e., he's consistent that it was originally machlekes, but Rameir was chayzer. So when he said loy nechleku, he doesn't mean that they never argued. He means the argument does not remain. Okay. Now, we said before that if it's missing all its skin, then according to Chum it's possible. But if it has a patch of skin the size of a coin, it's kosher, because that patch will regrow. Says the Gemara, Amar Ma'ar, where does this patch of skin have to be? Does it have to be in the back, the belly? Where does it have to be? Amar Rav Yehuda Meshmuel, apnei hashejer kula. It has to run down the spine. So here's the question. Let's say it has to be the size of a coin. Let's say the size of a coin is 1 inch diameter. Does that mean there has to be a patch of skin 1 inch diameter that runs through the entire back? Or a small patch of skin running through the entire back that if you were to add it all together would be 1 inch? That's the question. Says the Gemara, that we're not sure about. So Tashima, the Brisa answers, the Parush of Nuroi Mishmei Shmuel, Beroichev Asela Apnei Hashejer Kula. It has to be the entire spine, and the entire strip has to be the size of a coin. So not just all of it in cumulative the size of a coin, it has to be the diameter of a coin running down the spine. That's the first opinion of where does this skin patch have to be. So the first opinion is it has to run down the spine. Rabbi Chana Amar Rashi Prakim. It has to be on the main joints of the body. Rav Elazar ben Antigus Rishon Elazar ben Yanai Amar Makim Tibur. It has to be on the belly. So these are three opinions of where does this patch have to be in order to save the animal from being a treifa. Here's the question. So you have belly, spine, and main joints. What about the opposite? What if those are the only parts of the body that are missing skin? What if you have an animal that has all its skin except the spine, or all its skin except the belly, or all its skin except the main joints? Are we machmer the opposite? Says the Gemara, Boy Rav Yana Rav Shmuel, Nitel Makam Hashajar v'Kulikayim, Nitel Makam Tibur v'Kulikayim, Nitel Rasha Barak v'Kulikayim. What's the halacha? Teku. Not sure. All right, last halacha. Amarav, Kola or oil kuloi matzil begluda. Any spare skin will keep the animal from being a treifa, right? If the animal missing all its skin, it's treif. But if it has a patch of skin, we said it's kosher. Why? Because that patch of skin will regrow, but it has to be halachically skin. Says the Gemara, chutz me or beis haproises, except for the skin on the hooves. Apparently, the skin on the hooves is not considered skin in halacha. It's considered part of the hoof, and therefore it doesn't consider. It's not. Again, the animal has to have skin. So if it's missing all its skin except for on the hooves, it has a patch of skin. That doesn't count because the patch of hooves is not. The hooves is not considered It's not considered skin. Says the Gemara, Rav Yochanan Amar afilu or beis hapruzas nami matzil. What is it considered? So Rashi explains it's exact. Apparently, right on top of the hoof, there's a little bit of a flap. That's not considered skin. What is it considered? It's considered flesh. It's so soft you could eat it. So it's not considered skin. It's considered basar. Therefore, it's not considered the animal having skin because the little bit that it has is considered basar. Rav Yochanan Amar no afilu or beis hapruzas nami matzil. He says no. Even that, if there was a patch over there, it would be considered skin, and it would save the animal from being a gluda. Okay, so it's a machlokes whether the patch of skin on that area is considered or is it considered basar. Boy minei Rav Asi Rav Yochanan. The Gemara explains the background of the shayla. Rav Asi once asked Rav Yochanan, or beis hapruzas, if there is only skin on the place of the hooves, ma'oshiyatsu begluda, is the animal considered a treifa or not? That's the only skin it has. So Amar Le Matzel, he says, yeah, the animal has skin. It's not considered basar, it's considered or. Amar Le Lamatan Rabbeinu, but didn't you once teach us Elu Shairesein Kibsara and Arbeis Haprusais? Didn't you once teach us a Mishnah? This is regarding a nevela. The halacha is that the basar of nevela is spreads tumah. And you once taught us that the skin of that area also transmits tumah. Why? Because it's not skin, it's basar. So you're telling me it's skin, but didn't you once teach us a Mishnah that for the laws of nevela it's basar? So he says, Amar Le, Al Takniteni, stop bothering me. That Mishnah that said that it's considered basar, that's a das yachid. That's not universally accepted. Really, we paskin that it's skin. That Mishnah said that regarding nevela it's basar and not skin. That's a yachid. Raishitas don't hold that way. And we'll end with this. Where is this discussion coming from of whether it's a yachid or a rabbim ditanya, as the Brisa says? So whether that area is considered skin is negeya. We've seen two things. It's negeya whether it saves the animal from a treifa if it's the only skin it has. It's negeya nevela whether it's basar or or for transmission of tumah. You know what is also negeya? It's negeya pigel. Going back to pigel, our favorite thing from pigel was, right, if you shecht an animal with the intention of burning some of the carbon on the mizbeach at the wrong time, or the wrong place, right? It's pigel ve'im chayv karis, pigel v'chayv karis. What if you intend to burn the skin? That doesn't count. It has to be basar. So it's a shiloh also. What if you shech the animal with the intention of burning that part of the skin of the hooves on the mizbeach? So the Brisa says, "Hashaychid is oila. If you shech the oila, lahaktir ksayis ma'arshal tachas elya." With the intention of taking a kazayas of the skin under the tail, not the skin by the hooves, under the tail. The halach is possible in Mekaris, Chutzman, and Pigel V'chayv Mekaris. Why? Because the Tanakama, this is the key. The Tanakama Shita is that the skin that's under the tail is basar, all other skin is skin. So according to the Tanakama, which is how we paskin, the skin by the hooves is considered skin. The only skin of the animal of the animal that's considered basar is under the tail. But the skin on the hooves is considered or, and you would not be chayiv pigel for it. Rav Yochanan holds like that Tana. Who is the shita? Who's the yachid who says that the skin on the hooves is also basar and not or? Comes the Gemara, the Eliezer ben Yehuda ish ishbalin, Eliezer ben Yehuda of Iblim, Amar Mishum Rav Yaakov, he quotes Rav Yaakov, V'chein hay Rav Shimon ben Yehuda shikus ay Mishum Rav Shimon. They also quote Rishon bar Yochai, who said echad ar beis haprusais, whether it's the skin of the hooves, echad ar haroishal egel harach, or it's the skin of the young calf, v'echad ar shel tachas elyu, or the skin under the tail. Notice the skin on the hooves. The halacha is all of these have the status of basar, and therefore lahavi ar beis haboisem, also the ar of the beis haboisem, which is one of the stomachs. Chutzlim kaimai pasal ve'en by kares, chutzlizmanai pigel v'chayv kares. They say that area is also considered basar, and it will be chayiv pigel. So going back, this machlekes tanoim is what is the status of the skin on the hooves. The Tanakama would say the skin of the hooves is skin, and you're not chayiv pigel, and it would not transmit tuma, and for our discussion, it would save the animal from a treifa, and Rav Shimon bar Yochai is the only one who's chaylik. And Rav Yochanan said, so you asked me a kasha from that brayso, that follows Rav Shimon bar Yochai, we don't pass in that way. All right, we'll stop here.